Welcome to the Reed Flute. Find a comfortable position, take a slow, deep breath, and let the day gently fall away as we begin. The night opened slowly over the caravanserai outside Nishapur. The last merchants had tied their camels near the wall, and the animals folded their legs into the sand with soft complaints. A clay lamp burned in a niche. Its flame moved whenever the wind slipped under the wooden gate. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a reed flute breathed one thin note, then another, as if a reed bed far away had remembered its own river. A young traveler named Salman sat near the lamp with his cloak around his shoulders. Dust clung to his hem. He had ridden all day with a letter folded inside his robe, a letter from someone he loved and feared to lose. The words were gentle, yet he had read them like a man searching for a wound. She had asked for time. She had asked for quiet. She had asked to be allowed to walk a little distance without being followed by questions. Salman had not said this aloud, but the old dervish beside him seemed to hear the tightness in his breathing. The dervish held a nay across his knees. Its reed was darkened from years of touch. There was once, the dervish said, a man whose name had become another name for longing. He spoke of Majnun, who wandered the dry places because of Layla. His clothes were torn by thorn bushes. His hair carried the scent of dust and rainless wind. Children laughed when they saw him. Men in the bazaar shook their heads. Women lowered their eyes, half in pity, half in wonder. Majnun did not walk like a man with a destination. He walked like a man whose destination had entered everything. One evening, near the edge of a village, he saw a lean dog trotting along the road. Its ribs showed under its coat. Its paws were white with dust. A boy threw a pebble at it, and the dog leapt aside, startled. Majnun cried out as though the stone had struck his own heart. He went to the animal, knelt in the dirt, and touched its head with both hands. Those who followed him began to laugh. Majnun, one man called, have you become so lost that you bow to dogs now? Another said, this is only a stray. It eats scraps. It sleeps in alleys. Why honor it? Majnun lifted his face. There was dust on his cheek where he had pressed it near the dog's fur. You see a stray, he said. I see a creature that has walked through Layla's lane. Perhaps its paws touched the earth outside her door. Perhaps its ears heard her window open. Perhaps the dust on its coat came from the road where she once passed. The men fell quiet, not because they understood, but because they heard that he was not speaking to them anymore. He was speaking to the hidden thread that ran between one heart and another. The dog, freed from all human argument, shook itself and began to trot away. Majnun did not seize it. He did not tie a rope around its neck. He did not say, because you have been near Layla, you belong to me. He watched it go, and the watching itself became a kind of prayer. His eyes followed the animal until the dusk folded it into the road. The old dervish in the caravanserai turned the nay slowly in his hands. Majnun honored what had touched the beloved, he said, but he did not trap it. His longing made him tender, not greedy. Salman looked down at the letter in his robe. For the first time that night, he did not reach for it. He listened to the camels breathing near the wall, to the lamp's small hiss, to the reed flute waiting across the dervish's knees. May you love what has passed near the beloved without needing to close your hand around it. The lamp burned lower, and the road of longing turned toward a garden where a nightingale mistook nearness for love. Beyond the caravanserai wall, the desert gave way to a walled garden that belonged to no one awake. Its gate stood half open. Pomegranate trees leaned over the path, their leaves black against the indigo sky. Water moved through a narrow channel cut into stone, carrying one trembling reflection of the moon. In that garden, Attar tells of the birds before they began their long search for the simurgh. They gathered under the guidance of the hoopoe, each one bright with a different excuse. each one frightened by the distance ahead. The partridge loved gems. The duck loved water. The hawk loved the royal wrist. And the nightingale, trembling with music, would not leave the rose. He had spent the evening on a branch above her. The rose had opened in the last gold of sunset, petal after petal, like a secret slowly trusting the air. Her scent rose into the garden. It touched the wall, the water, the sleeping roots. The nightingale's small body shook with song. "Do not ask me to travel," he told the hoopoe. "What is the simmer to me? Here is my king. Here is my prayer. Here is the red cup from which I drink. I sing, and she opens. I stop, and the night feels empty. My road is this branch. My cobbler is this rose." The hoopoe listened. He was not cruel. He knew the fever of a heart that finds one face and believes the whole sky has narrowed into it. He let the nightingale sing until dew gathered along the leaves. Then he spoke. "Little singer," he said, "you love the rose, but you have mistaken her beauty for a promise that she can belong to you. Look closely." The nightingale looked. The rose shone in the lamp-like dusk. Her petals were soft, but already the edge of one had begun to darken. A beetle moved through her shadow. Tomorrow the sun would open her to bees. The next day wind might loosen her. A hand might gather her, or no hand at all. She belonged to the breath that made her bloom, not to the song that praised her. The nightingale trembled. "She listens when I sing," he whispered. "She receives you," said the hoopoe. "That is not the same as being owned." A silence entered the garden. It did not break the nightingale's love. It made it wider. He sang again, but the sound changed. Before, his song had leaned toward the rose like a hungry hand. Now it rose around her and let her stand in her own fragrance. He did not sing to keep her. He sang because her brief opening had awakened the music in him. The rose, if a rose can smile, seemed to rest more freely on her stem. By midnight, the birds lifted one by one into the dark. The nightingale delayed only long enough to bow his head toward the flower. A few drops of dew fell from the branch like small pearls. Then he followed the hoopoe, not because he loved the rose less, but because he had learned that love which refuses the road becomes a cage built from perfume. In the caravanserai, Salman listened while the old dervish spoke. He remembered how often he had taken a beloved smile and tried to make it a contract, how often he had received a word and wanted it repeated until it lost its breath. Outside, a faint wind moved through the reeds near the dry stream bed. The dervish lifted the ney and played only 3 notes. They hung in the air like rose scent after the petals close. May you praise the rose while it blooms, and let its stem remain in the keeping of the garden. From the garden path, the night moved toward a hillside where a shepherd loved in words too simple for scholars. On a high road where the hills were blue with night, a shepherd kept watch over his flock. His cloak was patched at the shoulder. His sandals were cracked from stone and dust. A small fire burned near him, and the sheep lay close together in a pale, breathing circle. The shepherd was alone, or thought he was. Loneliness had loosened his tongue. He spoke into the dark with the tenderness of a child tending someone ill. "O Lord," he murmured, "where are you? Let me comb your hair. Let me wash your clothes. Let me bring you milk still warm from the ewe. Let me mend your sandals if the road has worn them thin. Let me sit beside you when you are tired." He spoke with all his heart, but not with polished speech. His love had the smell of wool and smoke. It carried the roughness of the hillside. He knew no courtly language for the hidden one. He only knew what care looked like in his own hands. Moses, passing on the road, heard him. The prophet stopped. The firelight touched his face. He listened a moment, and the shepherd's words seemed too small, too bodily, too full of human imagining. "Do you know to whom you speak?" Moses said. The shepherd startled and stood. The sheep shifted in their sleep. You speak as if the Lord were a man in need of your comb and milk, Moses continued. Such words are not fitting. The Holy One is beyond hunger, beyond clothing, beyond weariness. Close your mouth on such foolishness. The shepherd's face changed. Shame came over it like a cloud crossing the moon. He bowed his head. The hands that had wanted to serve began to tremble. I have burned my tongue, he whispered. I did not know. He turned away from the fire and walked into the dark hills, leaving the sheep behind for a moment, leaving even his own simple prayer. Then the unseen rebuke came to Moses, not as thunder for the world, but as a fire inside the heart. Why did you separate my servant from me? I gave each soul its own way to speak. I do not look at the shape of the cup, but at the thirst within it. His words were not for you to own, weigh, or correct. They were between his heart and mine. Moses stood in the road while the stars burned above him. He saw then that even reverence can become possession when it says, love must sound like my love, kneel like my knees, choose the words I approve. He went searching over the hillside, calling the shepherd's name. At last he found him near a dark ravine, sitting with his cloak pulled around him. Brother, Moses said softly, speak as you spoke. Your prayer was accepted. But the shepherd looked up, and his eyes were clear in a way they had not been before. I have gone beyond combs and sandals, he said. The wound of your correction opened a door. Yet do not grieve. My Lord heard me even when I spoke badly, and he hears me now when I have no words. Moses sat beside him. Neither man spoke for a while. Below them, the sheep were pale stones in the firelight. The night held both silence and song. In the caravanserai, Salman thought of the person he loved. He had often corrected her way of being close. If she was quiet, he asked why. If she spoke lightly, he wanted depth. If she gave depth, he feared farewell beneath it. He had tried to own not only her presence, but her manner of presence. The old dervish watched the lamp flame tremble. Some hearts love with shepherd words, he said. Some with silence. Some with bread. Some by walking away before anger spoils the room. A jealous heart calls these differences danger. A listening heart calls them weather. May you let the beloved speak in the language given to their own soul. The hillside grew still, and the night descended toward Basra, where a woman walked with fire in one hand and water in the other. Basra lay under a warm night, its alleys smelling of dust, river mud, and the last bread pulled from ovens before sleep. Doorways were dark. Roofs held small families beneath the stars. A cat moved along a wall with the patience of a shadow. Through one narrow street walked Rabia of Basra. Her robe was plain. Her steps were steady. In one hand, she carried a burning torch. In the other, she carried a bowl of water. The flame painted gold along the clay walls. The water held a trembling piece of the moon. A few men who had been sitting outside a shop rose when they saw her. They knew Rabia as one who had given her heart wholly to the friend. She owned little. She asked little. Her poverty was not bitterness. It was a room swept clean. Mother of goodness, one of them called softly. Where are you going at this hour with fire and water? Rabia stopped. The torch snapped in the breeze. I am going, she said, to burn paradise and quench hell, so that no one will love the real for reward or fear, but only for love. The men lowered their eyes. It was not that they thought she could burn the gardens of the next world or drown the pit with one bowl. They understood the gesture. She was carrying a teaching through the street because sometimes the heart cannot hear unless the hands make a picture. One young man followed her at a distance. He had been troubled in love. His beloved had grown quiet with him, and his prayers had become bargains. Return her to me, and I will fast. Make her right, and I will give alms. Let her choose me, and I will praise you. He did not see that even his worship had become a rope thrown toward the sky. Rabia turned, though he had made no sound. "Why do you follow?" she asked. He bowed awkwardly. "I heard your words," he said. "I do not understand them. If there is no reward, why does a person love? If there is no fear of loss, why does the heart stay faithful?" Rabia looked at the torch. Its flame leaned and straightened. She looked at the bowl. The moon inside it broke and gathered again. "Have you ever sat beside a sick friend?" she asked. "Yes." "Did you sit there because he promised you a garden?" "No." "Did you wipe his brow because you feared a whip?" "No." "Then you already know something of love. Love is what remains when bargaining is tired." The young man's throat tightened. He thought of the woman he loved. He saw how often he had offered kindness like a merchant weighing spice. A message for a message. A visit for a promise. Patience for proof. Even his tenderness had waited at the door with an open account book. Rabia began walking again. The young man did not follow this time. He stood beneath a wooden balcony and listened to her steps fade. The torchlight passed from wall to wall until it was gone. The bowl of water vanished with it, carrying its small moon into the dark. In the caravanserai, the old dervish touched the holes of the ney without playing. Salman could almost feel the shape of his own bargains. He had called them devotion. He had said, "I only want to know where I stand." But beneath the words had lived a small demand: "Pay me back for loving you." Rabia did not ask the heart to stop longing, the dervish said. She asked it to stop selling longing as a debt. The lamp between them had burned low enough that its flame was blue at the root and gold at the tip. May you love without turning your tenderness into a price. The alley of Basra emptied into a moonlit market, where Nasreddin searched for what he had lost in the wrong place. In a market town where the streets bent like old fingers, Nasreddin Haja came out after nightfall and began searching the dust beneath a public lamp. The lamp hung from an iron hook outside the tea seller's shop. Moths tapped themselves against its glass. The ground below it was bright enough to show pebbles, straw, a broken date pit, and the toe marks of sandals. Nasreddin bent low, patting the earth with both hands. A neighbor saw him from across the lane. "Haja," he said, "what have you lost?" "My key," Nasreddin answered without looking up. The neighbor was a kind man when kindness did not cost too much. He came over and began searching too. Soon a third man joined them, then a boy with a sleepy face, then the tea seller himself, who held another little lamp and complained that people always lost things just when he wanted to close. They searched carefully. They sifted dust between their fingers. They looked behind the lamp post. They moved a basket. They checked Nasreddin's sleeves, then the ground again. Nothing. At last the neighbor straightened, rubbing his back. "Haja," he said, "are you sure you lost it here?" Nasreddin stood and blinked at him. "No," he said, "I lost it inside my house." The men stared. "Inside your house?" "Yes." "Then why are we searching under the street lamp?" Nasreddin looked surprised by the foolishness of the question. "Because the light is better here." The tea seller groaned. The boy laughed so hard he sat down in the dust. The neighbor threw up his hands. But Nasreddin, whose foolishness often carried a needle inside its sleeve, only smiled and kept looking at the bright ground. In the caravanserai, Salman almost smiled for the first time that night. The old dervish did not hurry the lesson. He let the small laughter settle, the way tea leaves sink after boiling. "The jealous lover," the dervish said at last, "often searches where the light is easier." Salman looked toward him. "He has lost peace inside his own house," the dervish continued, "but he searches in the beloved's face. He searches in her pauses. He searches in the time between one message and another. He searches in who greeted her, who sat beside her, who made her laugh. Those places are bright because they are outside him, Everyone can gather there and help him search. But the key was dropped in a darker room. The young traveler lowered his eyes. He remembered counting the minutes before a reply. He remembered listening for changes in tone. He remembered making a chord of his own mind and placing the beloved in it again and again. He had called it care. It had felt like care because it kept him busy. But his peace had not been lost in her silence. It had been lost in the old room of his own fear. Nasreddin's neighbors finally left him under the lamp. The tea seller closed his shutters. The moths kept knocking at the glass. Nasreddin, when no one remained to scold him, took a candle from inside his robe and walked home. There, in his own dark doorway, he lifted the candle. The key lay near the threshold, half hidden under the edge of a mat. He picked it up, nodded as if the key had been waiting to teach him manners, and went inside. The old dervish gave a soft breath through the nay. It was not quite a note, more like the beginning of one. Love asks us to look honestly, he said, not only at the beloved, but at the room in ourselves where fear keeps dropping its keys. May you stop searching the beloved's freedom for the peace that was misplaced within you. From Nasreddin's doorway, the knight crossed to a palace gate where a gift tried to become a leash. In Shiraz, when the orange trees were dark and the palace lamps shone like low stars behind carved screens, a king sent for a poor dervish. The dervish was known in the lanes for owning almost nothing. He had a patched cloak, a wooden bowl, and a face that seemed weathered by both laughter and prayer. He slept where night found him and ate what was placed in his hand. The king had heard him speak once in a garden. The words had been plain, but they had entered the royal heart more easily than the polished speeches of ministers. Since then, the king had wanted the dervish near him, not only to hear wisdom, though he said so, not only to honor holiness, though he said that too. There was a quieter wish beneath it, to have the dervish as one has a rare cup, a singing bird, a fragrance kept in a private room. The king sent a robe of fine cloth, a purse of coins, and a message written in beautiful hand. Let the dervish come often to the palace, it said. The king's door is open to him. The messenger found the dervish beside a public fountain, washing dust from his feet. Children were floating leaves in the water. A baker's boy passed with trays of flatbread on his head. The dervish listened to the message, touched the robe, weighed the purse in his palm, and smiled. Tell the king, he said, that I accept his kindness if it is kindness. If it is a chain, it is too heavy for a poor man. The messenger frowned. No one chains a guest with silk, he said. The dervish wrung water from his beard. Silk is only thread that has been praised. The message returned to the palace. The king was not pleased, but neither was he angry. A man surrounded by yes can become curious when he hears no spoken without fear. The next evening, he rode quietly through the city with only one servant and found the dervish sitting beneath a plane tree. Do you dislike my gifts? The king asked. I dislike my own weakness, the dervish said. If I take what makes me visit when my heart is not called, I have sold my step. If I praise you because your robe warms me, I have sold my tongue. If I sit near you because your coins feed me, I have sold my hunger. Better to keep poverty than make friendship into trade. The king sat beside him on the ground. It had been many years since he had sat where dust could touch his robe. May a king not love a dervish? He asked. He may, said the dervish. But if he loves him, he must allow him to come and go like a breeze through the garden. No one enjoys the scent of jasmine by locking the wind in a chest. The king looked toward the palace hill. Its lamps were bright, yet from where he sat, the lights seemed small, like jewels sewn on a cloak too large for the body. He sent no more gifts for a while. When he wished to hear the dervish, he went to the fountain or the tree or the old mosque courtyard. Sometimes the dervish was there. Sometimes he was not. The king learned to receive absence without calling it insult. In time, the meetings that did happen became clean. No purse lay between them, no rope, no hidden hook. In the caravanserai, Salman heard this and felt the weight of his own offerings. He had given attention and wanted certainty back. He had given praise and waited for nearness. He had offered help and silently asked to be needed. The old dervish rubbed one thumb along the nay's hollow reed. "A gift may be bread," he said, "or it may be a knot. The hand knows which it is before the mouth confesses. May you give what is free and refuse to hide a hook inside tenderness." The palace lamps dimmed behind them, and the knight moved to a small cell where a disciple wanted to wear his master's cloak. In Bistam, the winter night pressed against the walls of Bayazid's small room. A brazier glowed in the corner. Its coals were red beneath a skin of ash. The old master sat wrapped in a rough cloak, listening to the wind move along the roof beams. A young disciple named Hamid waited near the doorway. He had followed Bayazid for 3 years. He had carried water, swept the threshold, copied sayings by lamplight, and watched every gesture of the master's hands. When Bayazid stood, Hamid noticed how he placed his feet. When Bayazid ate, Hamid noticed how little. When Bayazid was silent, Hamid tried to make his own silence the same shape. That night, after long hesitation, Hamid bowed until his forehead touched the mat. "Master," he said, "give me your cloak." Bayazid opened his eyes. "My cloak is old," he said. "It has smoke in it. It will not keep you warmer than yours." "I do not ask for wool," Hamid said. "I ask for the blessing of nearness. If I wear what you wear, perhaps something of your state will enter me." The brazier made a small sound as one coal broke. Bayazid looked at the young man with tenderness, but not indulgence. He removed the cloak from his shoulders and laid it on the floor between them. "Come," he said, "put it on." Hamid's face brightened. He lifted the cloak as though lifting a relic and wrapped it around himself. It was heavier than he expected. It smelled of wool, smoke, rain, and the road. "Well?" Bayazid asked. Hamid closed his eyes. He waited. He wanted a door to open inside him. He wanted the master's peace to move into his ribs like warm breath. He wanted all the years of longing to be shortened by cloth. Nothing happened. The room remained the room. The wind remained wind. His knees ached from kneeling. Bayazid smiled faintly. "If you wore my cloak," he said, "you would still carry your own hunger beneath it. If you wore my skin, you would still have to meet the one with your own heart." Hamid's face reddened. He began to take off the cloak, ashamed. Bayazid raised a hand. "Do not be ashamed. Many disciples love the teacher as a child loves a lamp in a dark hall. That love is not wrong. But if the child steals the lamp and hides it under his coat, the hall goes dark for everyone, and even the child burns his chest." Hamid folded the cloak carefully and placed it back before the master. "What should I do with my love for you?" he asked. Bayazid put the cloak around his shoulders again. "Let it make you brave enough to become true," he said. "Do not become my shadow. Shadows vanish when the lamp moves. Become a flame from the same fire." The young disciple lowered his head. Outside, snow began to fall, light as sifted flour. It softened the roof, the lane, the bare branches near the door. Hamid sat until dawn without trying to copy the master's breathing. For the first time, his silence was awkward, uneven, his own. In the caravanserai, Salman felt the lesson settled differently from the others. He had wanted to live inside the beloved's attention. He had wanted her thoughts to cover him like a cloak. When she was bright, he felt bright. When she withdrew, he felt stripped. He had called this love, but it had left him without his own fire. The dervish played a low note on the ney, hollow and warm. The reed does not become music by borrowing another reed's song. he said. "It must be hallowed where it stands. May you cherish the lamp without stealing it and become warm from your own flame." The snow of Bistam melted into another chamber of the night, where Junayd listened to a man who spoke too loudly of love. Baghdad at night was never fully silent. Even after the markets closed, the city murmured in its sleep. Water sellers rinsed their cups. A donkey shifted in a narrow lane. Somewhere a mother sang to a child behind a carved wooden screen. The tigress moved in darkness, carrying broken stars along its back. In a modest gathering room near the old quarter, Junayd sat among his companions. A lamp burned on the floor. Its light reached the faces nearest it and left the corners soft. Men came to Junayd with questions, but they often left with fewer words than they had brought. That evening, a young seeker named Yusuf entered with bright eyes and a restless step. He had fasted, traveled, argued, sung, wept, and spoken much of love. Wherever he went, he declared his devotion. In bazaars, at wells, on roads, before teachers, before strangers, he would say, "I love the friend more than life. I love beyond measure. I love beyond myself." Some were moved by him. Others were tired. Junayd received him kindly. Yusuf bowed and sat. "Master," he said, "I have come because my heart is burning with love." Junayd looked at him for a long moment. "Then sit by the door tonight," he said, "and greet whoever enters." Yusuf blinked. He had expected a secret phrase, perhaps a blessing whispered close to the ear, perhaps a sign that Junayd recognized his fire. But he bowed and went to the door. The night lengthened. Men entered with damp cloaks. Yusuf greeted them. An old woman came to ask for bread for her grandson. Yusuf found bread. A traveler arrived smelling of camel sweat and onions. Yusuf made space for him. A boy spilled water near the threshold. Yusuf wiped it. No one asked about his burning heart. After an hour, he looked toward Junayd, but the master was speaking softly to someone else. Near midnight, a man entered who had once insulted Yusuf in another city. The man did not seem to recognize him. His beard was wet from mist. His sandals were muddy. He stepped across the threshold and left dirt on the mat Yusuf had just cleaned. A heat rose in Yusuf's chest. He wanted to speak. He wanted to remind the man. He wanted justice, or at least recognition. Instead, Junayd's eyes met his from across the room. Yusuf lowered his gaze. He brought the man a cup of water. The man drank and sighed. "May God reward you," he said, not knowing whom he thanked. Toward dawn, when the gathering had thinned, Junayd called Yusuf near. "Tell me," he said, "where was your love tonight?" Yusuf opened his mouth, then closed it. His grand words had become shy. "It was less loud than I thought," he said. Junayd nodded. Love that wants to be admired is still looking in a mirror. Love that wants to possess the beloved is still afraid of being nobody. Tonight you stood at the door. You were not the center of the room. Yet something in you remained. Trust that. Yusuf looked at his hands. They smelled of wet wool, bread, and spilled water. His love no longer felt like a banner. It felt like a small lamp that could be carried without showing it to everyone. In the caravanserai, Salman recognized the wish to be named, chosen, confirmed. He had wanted his beloved not only to love him, but to make him visible to himself. Her attention had become the mirror in which he checked whether he existed. The old dervish rested the nay against his shoulder. Junayd did not put out the young man's fire, he said. He moved it away from the mirror. May you love without asking the beloved to prove that you are real. The door of Junayd's room opened into a darker garden, where moths circled a candle and learned what could not be carried away. In a garden pavilion outside the city, a candle burned through the deep part of the night. The pavilion had slender pillars painted with fading vines. A brass tray sat beneath the candle to catch the wax. Beyond the open arches, cypress trees stood as dark witnesses, and the stars looked close enough to be poured into a bowl. Attar tells of moths who wanted to know the secret of the flame. They had heard of its brightness. They had seen distant lamps glowing in human houses. They had felt, in their small bodies, a pull toward light that no moth could fully explain. One moth flew near a palace window and returned breathless. "I have seen the candle," he said. "It is a golden tower with a trembling crown. It pushes darkness away." The others listened, impressed, but an elder moth shook his wings. "You have seen the light from far away," he said. "You do not yet know the candle." Another moth flew closer. He entered a room where a candle stood beside an open book. Heat touched his wings. He circled once, twice, and fled back into the night. "I know more," he said. "The candle is not only brightness. It has warmth. It calls and threatens. It gives and consumes." The elder moth was quiet. "You have felt its breath," he said. "Still, you do not know." A third moth rose without speaking. He flew through the open window, past the book, past the cup, past the sleeping hand of the scholar whose lamp it was. He circled the candle so near that the flame bent toward him. For one instant his wings were outlined in gold. Then he entered the flame and vanished into it. The other moths waited in the garden. No report came back. No description. No proud return. Only the candle burning, and in that burning, a knowledge that could not be brought home as a possession. The elder moth lowered his head. "He knows," he said, "because he no longer stands apart saying, 'The flame is mine.'" In the caravanserai, the old dervish told this softly, without making it harsh. He did not speak of destruction as men do when they want to frighten. He spoke of the little self that keeps circling love with claims. "My beloved, my place, my answer, my future, my right to know." That self wants the flame for its own room. It wants to carry the candle away and still have it remain a candle. Salman watched a moth move near their lamp. It came close, then drifted back into shadow. He felt pity for it, and then for himself. How many nights had he circled the beloved's freedom, afraid to enter the greater fire where love loses the word mine? The dervish placed a clay shade around the lamp so the moth would not burn itself. The gesture was small and kind. "Do not misunderstand Attar," he said. "The moth does not teach us to harm the body or chase pain. It teaches that the claim must burn. Love is not proven by keeping the beloved under your wing. It is proven when the little owner in the heart grows quiet." The night outside seemed to deepen. Even the camels had stopped shifting. Somewhere far away, a jackal called once and fell silent. Salman breathed in. The air smelled of lamp oil, wool, and cooling sand. The letter in his robe no longer felt like a verdict. It felt like paper, only paper, carrying another person's honest need for space. May the word mine soften before it scorches what it loves. The candle's glow faded into the scent of warm bread, and the night turned toward Shiraz, where Hafiz waited beneath a window. Shiraz was fragrant after midnight. Even when the shops were closed and the alleys lay dark, the city seemed to keep roses in its breath. In one quarter, near a bakery whose ovens glowed before dawn, a young Hafiz carried trays of bread through the streets. Flour dusted his sleeves. Heat reddened his hands. He knew the weight of bread, the rhythm of work, the quiet hunger of houses waiting for morning. There is an old tale told of those years when Hafiz loved a young woman whose beauty had become famous in the city. Some called her Shaki Nabit, branch of sugarcane. Whether that was her true name or a name longing gave her, the tale keeps it like a perfume in a folded cloth. Hafiz saw her once at a window. A curtain moved. A face appeared for the length of a breath, then withdrew. That was enough. The baker's boy with flour on his sleeves became a night traveler of the heart. He began to pass that street whenever he could. He did not shout beneath the window. He did not throw stones to wake her. He did not shame her name in the mouths of others. He walked by with bread balanced on his head and a storm hidden under his ribs. Sometimes the window was closed. Sometimes a lamp burned behind the screen. Sometimes there was nothing but wall and shadow. His longing grew until sleep left him. In Shiraz, there was a place where seekers went to keep vigil, hoping for a sign from the unseen. Hafiz went there for 40 nights, so the story says. He sat beneath the dark, holding his desire like a cup filled too near the rim. At first, he prayed to possess the face he had seen. Then, as the nights passed, the prayer changed. The face became a doorway. The doorway opened into a longing older than his own name. On the final night, when the stars were paling and the city had not yet woken, Kaider came to him, the green guide of hidden roads. Some say he brought a cup. Some say he brought only a glance. Hafiz received what could not be measured by the hand. After that, the poems began to ripen in him. The woman at the window did not become his property. The city did not deliver her like bread to his door. Yet his love was not wasted. It had broken the shell of ordinary wanting. Through one human beauty, he had been led toward the beauty that cannot be owned and cannot be exhausted. In the caravanserai, Salman leaned back against the wall. He knew the ache of a single glimpse. A lifted face, a laugh across a courtyard, a message read in the dark. The heart takes one small thing and builds a palace around it, then suffers when the person inside the palace asks to remain free. The old dervish smiled faintly. Hafiz did not insult the window because it closed, he said. He let the closed window teach him the sky. A few travelers near the far wall had fallen asleep. One had his hand open beside him, palm upward, empty as a small bowl. The night seemed kinder around that hand. Salman touched the folded letter through his robe. He imagined the person who had written it not as a locked room he must enter, but as a window through which life had once shown him a wider light. The thought did not remove longing. It gave longing more air. Outside, the east was still dark, but somewhere a baker was beginning again. The smell of warm bread entered the courtyard. May the closed window become sky in you, and not a wall your heart keeps striking. From the bakery street, a green parrot called from a merchant's cage, dreaming of trees it had not forgotten. A merchant in Rumi's telling kept a green parrot in a cage. The cage hung near the window of his house, where light fell through a carved screen and made patterns on the floor. The parrot was beautiful. Its feathers held the color of leaves after rain. Its eyes were bright. When it spoke, the household laughed. When it sang, even the servants paused. The merchant loved the bird, or believed he did. He gave it sugar. He polished the brass cage. He boasted of its cleverness to guests. Yet the door stayed shut. The bird's branch was a wooden bar. Its sky was the space between two wires. One day the merchant prepared for a journey to India. He went through the house asking each person what gift they wanted on his return. A daughter asked for silk. A servant asked for a knife with a good handle. Another asked for spice. Last, he came to the parrot. "And you," he said, "what shall I bring you from India?" The parrot tilted its head. "When you reach the forests," it said, "and see parrots flying free among the trees, tell them of me. Say that one of their kin lives in a cage far away. Ask them if they have any counsel." The merchant laughed, but he promised. After many weeks, he came to a green place in India where parrots flashed through the trees like leaves given wings. Remembering his promise, he called up to them. "I bring news of a parrot in my house," he said. "It lives in a fine cage and sends greetings. It asks if you have counsel." At once, one parrot high in the branches trembled, fell from the tree, and lay motionless on the ground. The merchant was horrified. "My words have killed it," he cried. He returned home heavy with guilt. His family received their gifts. The caged parrot waited. "What did the free parrots say?" it asked. The merchant sighed. "I fear to tell you. When I spoke of you, one of them shook and fell dead from the tree." The parrot listened. Then it too trembled, dropped from its perch, and lay still at the bottom of the cage. The merchant cried out. His beloved bird, his jewel, his singer, was gone. With shaking hands, he opened the cage and lifted the little body. He carried it to the window to lay it outside. The moment it touched open air, the parrot sprang up, flew to a high branch, and looked back. The merchant stared, astonished. "So this was the counsel," the parrot said. "The free one showed me how to escape. I had to die to the life you gave me before I could live." The merchant's grief turned to bewilderment, then to a sorrow clearer than before. He saw that what he had called love had been ornamented captivity. Sugar had not made the cage less a cage. Praise had not opened the door. A polished prison still kept wings from remembering the forest. The parrot did not curse him. It did not stay to punish him. It only lifted into the green distance, carrying its own life back to the trees. In the caravanserai, the old dervish let the silence after the story remain. Salman felt it enter him like cool water. He had never placed anyone behind brass wires, yet he knew the smaller cages. The cage of constant questions, the cage of wounded looks, the cage of making another person responsible for his peace. "Sometimes," the dervish said, "the beloved must fall silent to escape what our fear has built." The reed flute lay between them now. Its hollow body had once been a reed standing among reeds. It had become music only after being cut, emptied, opened. May you recognize the cage even when it is polished with devotion, and bless the wing that remembers the forest. The parrot's flight crossed the last darkness before dawn, where a sun-like friend could not be held even by Rumi's hands. Before dawn, the caravanserai seemed to float between worlds. The stars were still present, but their edges had softened. The camels slept. The lamp in the niche was nearly spent. A faint ash-colored line waited behind the eastern dunes, not yet light, not yet dark. The old dervish spoke one final story, and this one carried Kanya in it. Rumi had been a scholar, a teacher, a man of books, robes, and orderly respect. Students gathered around him. Questions came. Answers came. His house was known. His place in the world was clear. Then Shams of Tabriz entered his life like a sun entering a closed room. No one could easily explain Shams. He was rough to some, tender to others, hidden even when present. He did not come to decorate Rumi's life. He came as fire comes to dry wood. Under his companionship, Rumi's careful learning began to burn into song. The ink of books became the turning of the heart. The scholar became a reed flute with breath passing through it. Those around Rumi did not all rejoice. Some grew uneasy. Some were jealous of Shams. Some wanted their old teacher back, measured and available. Even love of a holy man can become possessive when disciples say, "Be who you were, because that is where we knew ourselves." Then Shams vanished. Rumi searched. He sent people along roads. He listened for news from travelers. Every rumor became a door. Someone said Shams had been seen in Damascus. Rumi sent gifts. Another said he had met him elsewhere. Rumi gave thanks even for uncertain words. One tale says a man brought false news, claiming to have seen Shams, and Rumi gave him his robe. When companions protested, Rumi answered that he gave the robe for a lie. For true news, he would have given his life. Such was the ache. Yet slowly, through absence, Rumi learned what no hand can hold. Shams was not a possession lost from a room. Shams had become a sun within the seeing itself. The friend who disappeared from the road rose inside the heart as music, as turning, as verses poured out in the night. Rumi did not stop longing. The reed flute does not stop remembering the reed bed, but longing changed its posture. It no longer clawed at the closed door. It became breath through the hollow place. It became the song of separation returning toward its source. In the caravanserai, Salman took the letter from his robe. The paper was creased from being opened too often. He did not read it again. He held it near the dying lamp and saw only the handwriting, the human trace of another life moving according to its own hidden weather. He thought of Majnun letting the dog go, the nightingale leaving the rose on its stem, Moses learning not to own another soul's prayer, Rabia burning the bargain, Nasreddin going home to search his own darkroom, Saadi's dervish refusing silk chains, Bayazid returning the disciple to his own flame, Junayd moving love away from the mirror, Attar's moth losing the claim, Hafiz letting the window become sky, the parrot rising from the opened cage. All night, the stories had not told him to love less. They had taught him to grip less. The old dervish lifted the ney at last and played. The sound was low, worn, and tender. It seemed to come from the reed bed and the knife that cut it, from the breath that entered it, from the emptiness that allowed it to sing. Salman closed his eyes. He did not know whether the beloved would return closer or continue farther away. For the first time, the not knowing did not feel like an enemy. The first gold of dawn touched the gate. May you rest in a love wide enough to let the beloved be free and deep enough to remain kind in the ache. The reed flute's final note thinned into morning, and the night gave you gently back to sleep. Thank you for spending this hour with the reed flute. If this brought you a moment of peace, consider subscribing. Rest well and sleep deeply.